My mom went to work for a short time to pay medical bills, and so my grandparents had a mom and pop grocery store, and they lived at the grocery store. The house was attached to it. And so I would spend time with them. I would go home and have dinner with mom and dad, then they'd come pick me up and I'd spend the night with grandma and grandpa. So I probably spent as much time with my grandparents as I did with my mom and dad for a couple of years. And during that time, I got spoiled rotten. I learned the ins and outs of a little grocery store, which was very nice. I learned to drink coffee at a very young age because my grandmother drank coffee, so she put about, this much coffee and about this much sugar and about this much cream in it. And so to this day, when I drink coffee, that's the way it is. When I was not in school yet and would spend time with grandma and grandpa, in the evenings after they closed the store, we used to go down to the train station and watch the trains come in. That was really kind of fun. And a couple times, Grandpa would actually take me into the train, and we get to walk on the train before it took off. And my grandma was just always sure she was going to have to drive to the next town to pick us up. We'd leave the train station, and we would go up to the airport and watch the airplanes come in. That was just kind of like a weekly routine. And on the way back, there was a little drive-in. It was called Larry's Drive-In, and they had fish and chips. And they had homemade ice cream sodas. And so on the way back from the airport, we would come down the hill that came right by there, and I would always say, my tummy is growling for a sody. So of course, Grandma and Grandpa, they gave in, and we had sodas. When I was little, probably less than 5, we had a little store in the town where Grandma and Grandpa lived, and it was called Sloan's Variety Store. It was kind of like a Walmart, a very small Walmart. And my grandma was real good friends with the lady that owned it. And I went in there with her one day, and there was something that I wanted. I don't remember at this point what it was. And she was trying to check out and visit with this lady, and I was being very demanding, and I was tugging on her, and Grandma, get me this, and Grandma, get me that. And she turned around and she said, just wait a minute. And it made me so mad, and I stomped and screamed the entire length of the store to the front door. And Grandma was mortified, and I can guarantee that day I did not get what I wanted because Grandma was teaching me a lesson. So, you learn little things like that. When I was in grade school, I started taking piano lessons. So I learned to play piano, and then I played softball for many years, which was kind of a family thing. We all played softball. And then when I got into high school, I was real involved in music. In my senior year of high school, 5 of my 6 classes were music classes. So I was very fortunate that I was able to play the piano, and that helped because back in those days, the students played piano rather than having a paid accompanist. I was chosen as concert choir president in my senior year, which was kind of an honor because I was chosen by the students, and I was able to actually direct our choir singing our alma mater at our graduation. So music has played a real important role in my life. A funny story, my dad was quite a character. One evening we were sitting at the dining room table, and we had just finished dinner, and I had a little bit of water in my cup left, and so I was kind of flicking it at him a little bit and just got little drops of water at him, and he looked at me kind of like, I wouldn't do that if I were you. And of course I kept doing it because I'm kind of ornery. And we finished dinner, and he didn't say anything more. And I was the dishwasher, so we had a big sink full of soap and water and stuff, and I was doing dishes, and the next thing I know, my head is in the sink. He had dunked my head in the dishwater, and I came up and I was so mad, and he just looked at me and pointed his finger, and I was like, I couldn't do anything more than laugh because I knew that it was payback and I deserved it. I can remember another time, and I don't remember how old I was still pretty young, and we used to go trick-or-treating to some of the people from church. And there was an older couple. They didn't have any kids, but she just was the sweetest little lady. She loved to kiss all the kids. And my dad decided that he was going to be funny, so we went trick-or-treating, and my dad dressed up in a trench coat, and he pulled a nylon stocking over his head, and he got down on his knees, and he was behind us. And when Nora opened the door, we got our candy. Well, Dad pushed his way through, and it scared her so bad that she either dropped the candy bowl or she threw it up in the air. And when she found out that it was Dad, then she really was mad. But so that was kind of the character that he was. He was very strict because he had a very strong German upbringing, but at the same time, he could also be kind of funny. My mom probably was more of the reprimander because Dad worked and mom didn't most of the time. And so I got away with probably a lot more than with my mother. She's always said, when your dad gets home, you're going to be in real trouble. And she wasn't kidding. I remember one particular time, I think I was in junior high. After my sister was born, my dad built a bedroom and a bathroom in the basement. So that was my bedroom, and that was kind of my little bailiwick there. And it was always kind of nice. They called me the queen of the cellar because I spent a lot of time down there. And I remember one particular day, my mom had made me mad about something. I don't recall what it was now, but I went stomping down the stairs, and I got to the bottom of the stairs, and I turned around and I stuck my tongue out. And Mother's intuition must have kicked in, because about the time that I stuck my tongue out, she stuck her head around the doorway, and she saw me, and that woman came flying down those stairs so fast. And I think I probably got a little tap on the cheek just to let me know that you won't do that again. So my timing on that was probably not very well. That's one of the few times I can remember my mom really, really losing her patience with me. When I was in junior high, my dad had a workbench in the basement. It was a really nice built-in workbench, had drawers, and the telephone was sitting on his workbench. And so whenever I was downstairs, I'd call my girlfriends and we would talk on that, or I'd answer the phone there. And I was probably in junior high, and I was talking on the phone with one of my friends, and Dad had a Phillips head screwdriver sitting there on the workbench. I just inadvertently picked it up and started poking holes into the drawer. I don't know why. It made cute little star patterns, and I was just mindlessly doing it, didn't think about the consequences. And unfortunately, when Dad found that out, I was in really big trouble. And I think to the day that they sold the house in 1987, those marks were still in the drawer. After my great-grandma died and my grandma's sister was killed in a car accident in 1972, my great-grandfather moved into a little house behind the house next door to my grandparents. And so Grandma could kind of keep an eye on him, and it still gave him his independence because he was in his 80s. And he used to love to watch wrestling, which was just so fake. And he would sit in this rocking chair with his cane, and he'd rock back and forth, and he would tap it, and he would just laugh and laugh and laugh because he just thought that the wrestling was so funny. And he always wore pinstripe overalls. I can always remember that. And I would go out when I was in probably junior high or high school. We would fix meals for him, and one of his favorite meals was clam chowder. So I'd go back and fix clam chowder for him. He loved pickled pig's feet, which I refused to fix for him. But I can just remember just sitting and visiting with him. And I didn't probably write down things that I should have about his life. But I wish now in hindsight that I would have taken more time to do that. I asked my grandma about my biological grandfather, and she would never talk about him. She just said, she goes, "It was the biggest mistake I ever made, and you just need to know that the grandfather you have now is the one that's your grandfather." So I don't know a lot about his side of the family. My mom probably knows more about that. And again, my grandparents on my dad's side didn't spend a lot of time with them. My grandmother on my dad's side they had very strong German heritage. She loved to bake. So I got my love of baking, I'm sure, from her and my two aunts, my dad's sisters. My dad had a brother that had an orchard, an apple and pear orchard, and then his sister and her husband also had an apple and pear orchard. So we spent a lot of time in the summer going up and staying with them, picking apples, picking pears. My dad's brother passed away suddenly of a heart attack in, I think, 1981. He was out working and he sat down to have lunch with my aunt and he said, "I don't feel good," and he fell over backwards and he was gone, which was kind of a shock to the family. My two cousins were teenagers at the time and they were actually at a church reunion when it happened, so it was kind of an upsetting time. One story I remember before we moved, I think we rented a house, and across the street from the house was an irrigation canal that they used to pull water out to water the orchards. And my mom and dad, it was probably like maybe 3 feet tall, 4 feet deep. And my mom and dad were always concerned that I would cross the road and go over and fall in and drown. And so they always would tell me, "Don't go over there because the spiders will get you." Well, bless them, because to this day I do not like spiders. I think it worked because I stayed away from the irrigation ditch. But to this day I detest spiders, so it worked. When I was a senior in high school, my mom had a cousin who lived in Pennsylvania, and my mom and dad decided to take a road trip to Pennsylvania to see her cousin Jane. So we piled in the car, and I think we took about 2 weeks. And when we left Pennsylvania to come back here, my mom wanted to drive through Missouri. And so we did, and Dad was he didn't care whether he stopped here or not. And I can remember coming through here, and there were horrible storms. They had tornado watches and tornado warnings, and of course, not being from here, we didn't realize what that meant. And so we were all kind of nervous about it, and I don't even remember where we stayed. And the next morning we got up and there had been some tornadoes in the outlying areas. And my dad said, "I will never live in this part of the country." And it wasn't too many more years after that he ended up moving here, kind of in a la-la land. God put him in a la-la land while we moved. But so that was kind of a fun experience. We were fortunate enough growing up that Mom and Dad took us on vacations. We spent a lot of time at the Oregon coast. They took us to Yellowstone one time. We took the trip to Pennsylvania. So we were blessed that they had the means to let us have nice vacations. Now, did we stay in really nice hotels with pools? No, we always stayed in what we called mom and pop little motels with dark paneling and TVs on the ceiling or on the wall. But so I think that's why my sister and I now, when we go somewhere, we like to stay somewhere really nice. But so I'm blessed in that respect. I've had a great family growing up. Lots of support from from my sibling, my parents, my church family, everybody. So I'm blessed in that respect. A couple of funny stories after moving here. The house that we live in now is a split level house. And so when you walk up the steps, you come in the front door, and then you can go downstairs to what used to be the garage, which is now family room, or upstairs to the bedrooms. And one particular day I had come home, I think I had been at work, and I came home from work and I walked down the hall and I happened to look into our youngest son's bedroom, and I looked up on the valance above the curtain rod and there was a squirrel on the curtain rod. And I looked and I kind of did a double take because I couldn't believe what I was seeing. And I and it turned around and looked at me and it went, "Kick, kick, 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 kick." And I'm like, "Oh dear, this is not good." And so Rick was at work and I called him and he just laughed. He thought it was funny. I called my grandma and my mom and they thought it was funny. And I'm like, "Well, you people are no help at all." So I called the animal control and they sent a guy out. And when he got to the house, he said, "Now, what is it that you have in your house?" And I said, "It's a squirrel." And he said, "Oh." So he took this long pole with a loop on it, and he took it up into the bedroom, and he shut the door, and he was in there probably for 5 minutes, and I could hear him running around, and he finally came out, and he came down the hall, and that squirrel was wrapped with the loop around him on the end of the pole, and so he took him out the door. I think the only thing we can think of is we rented the house at the time, and we were getting ready to buy it, and they were putting in a new water heater, and I think probably they had the bottom door open and the squirrel came in. That's the only thing that we can figure out. So that was squirrel story number one. A few years later, we had, there was an old Franklin type wood stove in the family room downstairs. It had the doors that opened like an accordion, and we never used it, but we were sitting down there one day, and Rick heard this noise, and it was kind of a rustling noise, and he looked around, and then he said, "That's coming from the wood stove." And so he went over, and he just barely opened the doors to the wood stove, and he could see two eyes peeking at him. And he's like, "There's an animal in the wood stove." So he opened it, and about that time, the squirrel bounded out of the wood stove, bounced off of his shoulder, and went running around the family room downstairs, and Rick's like waving his arms, trying to fend it off. And it got between a curtain and the window, and we weren't sure what to do because they can be mean. So he went and rigged up a little thing like the guy at the animal shelter. He got like a little rope and tied it around a little broomstick, and he finally trapped the squirrel, and he took it outside and he let it go, and about that time our cat was coming around the corner of the house, and the two of them met, and I don't know which one was more startled. So we've had some fun times with squirrels in our house, and then we had a cat once that brought a bird in the house, so we had to deal with that and try to chase it around and get it out. So no more cats, no more squirrels, we're done. In 2020, Rick had to have a knee replacement, and so he wasn't able to go up and down the stairs very much, and so he made his living room in our spare bedroom across the hall from our bedroom. And he put a recliner in there and kind of watched TV, and that was kind of his little area because it was close to the bathroom. And shortly after they released him from the little machine that he had to use, they said, "You can graduate to a walker." And we had gone to get a walker from my dad because my dad had used it when he was still alive. And so we brought it home, and of course it has the little buttons that you push in to adjust up and down, and one of them was broke. And so Rick, being the maintenance mechanic that he is, thinks that he can fix it. But he can't go up and down the stairs. So he said, "I need to have you go down and get me this, this, and this." So I went downstairs and I brought everything up. And he's like, "Okay, but you're missing a drill bit." So I had to go back downstairs, and I got the drill bit, and I brought it back upstairs. And he said, "That's not the right size." So I had to go back downstairs again and get something else. I made 4 or 5 trips downstairs to get the right thing, and by that time I was beginning to get a little annoyed because do you really need to use the walker? And so finally he got everything ready to go, and he had the drill, and he's drilling into this metal leg of this walker, and it's on carpet, and he didn't put anything down, so there are metal shavings going everywhere, all over the carpet. So not only did I have to do that, but then I had to vacuum it too. So he was not in my best graces. He told me that, he said, "I think I'll get a bell, so when I need something, I'll just ring the bell," and I advised him that that probably would not be a real good option for him. When he retired from work, he got back into golf. He used to golf in high school, and then he got back into golf. And he's always buying a golf club or a gun. And I can always tell when he's wanting something because he helps around the house. And I saw a little meme one day that said this little old guy was helping his wife vacuum and do dishes, and she said, "What caliber is it?" Or I could say, "Which golf club is it?" knowing that that's probably why he was helping. And we had gone. He wants me to get started in golf, and I have a set of golf clubs that he's bought, but he keeps saying that I need a better golf club. And so we went up to Liberty. We went to a golf store, used golf store up there. And we went in and he looked and looked and looked, and he said, well, I don't really see the golf club that you need. But he said, I have some clubs I want to see if I can sell to them. And so I went out to the car and he took the golf clubs in, and lo and behold, he sold the golf clubs and he came out with another golf club. So somehow the club that I was supposed to get when he sold the clubs ended up being a new club for him. He managed to work that out pretty good too. So I have yet to get out and enjoy golf very much. I like to drive the golf cart. It's nice just to get out and enjoy the weather. I've gone to the driving range a couple times this year, so we'll see what the future holds for that. I think the thing that, so I'll share a little story. I'm kind of, like I said, I'm kind of a rebel. Don't tell me I can't do something. And when Rick and I would have little disagreements, I would get mad and he would want to make up 5 minutes later. I wanted to pout. I'm like, I want to have my pout time. So, I wasn't a real good communicator, and at least in married life, you've got to keep the communication lines open, because if the communication closes and you don't work things out, then that's not ever going to work for you. So I learned real quick, like Rick taught me, that we have to talk about things. And as much as I wanted to pout, I had to think about things. And I'm a lot better now. I'm not a pouter so much anymore. I think the other thing is, life's too short to take it too seriously, and you need to forgive and forget. And forgiveness is a hard thing. Forgetting is even harder. But I know that the Lord has said, if you can't forgive others, I can't forgive you. And so that's probably the biggest thing that sticks in my mind right now, is you've got to overlook a lot of things and forgive others. So I was kind of like, oh my gosh, I'm a little bit nervous because I tend to ramble sometimes, and I get to talking and don't know when to quit. This has been great. I've really enjoyed it. And it's actually brought back a lot of memories. I sat down last night and started kind of jotting down things, and I'm sure there are lots more that I could have come up with if I'd had more time to think about it. But this is great, and I think this is a great thing that you're doing, just for family keepsakes. I don't know if my family's going to want to see some of this, but it's been great.